Okay, so how's everybody doing? Hi, hello, and all that. Um, so I'm back again. It's been a while since I've made a video, but um, I had thought about it for a while, and what I really wanted to do was make something worthwhile, something with quality, as opposed to quantity. So basically, what I did was. Um, I was inspired by the first chapter that really struck me in the New Testament, and that ended up being Mark 4. And and I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to, you know, stop focusing on reading a chapter every day and just hone in on this particular one and just really do because again, I wanted to focus on making a quality video. So what I did was I just focused solely on this chapter for over a week now, I would say. And just a couple hours a day, here and there, because I've been working a lot, because of the holidays and everything like that. And a little bit every day, I would just work on it a little bit more. Still technically not as complete as I would like it to be, but I already have a lot of material. Um, and I don't know how many parts this is going to be. I don't know how many hours, how long it'll be to really get to the bottom of this singular chapter. But hopefully by the end of however many parts this is going to be, people will understand more of why it's important to really break down and dissect and divide the word of truth, as Paul says, because every single word, every single syllable is not wasted. It's not accidental. Every single thing that is written in the Holy Bible, and what's more important is the New Testament, especially the four Gospels, is intentional, has meaning, it has purpose, and that's the thing that I want to point out through the dissection of this singular chapter. And I basically just went through and dissected. I have not done a preliminary test or sort of like beta reading or anything like that. All of this, I have the notes, but I kind of went over a few of the verses just to kind of see if how it would go. But ultimately, I decided, I'm going to keep it fresh, try and do it off the top of my dome here. Because it's like a journey, as David Lightbringer pointed out earlier, it's like, I kind of want to bring y'all along with me because, since it's all going to be fresh and it's going to be, sort of unscripted in that sense, aside from my, outline and, my notes and stuff like that, there's most likely going to be a lot of revelations that sort of come through the process of making this video. So yeah, I'm the only plan that I have for this video series. It's probably going to be about 2 or 3 parts, and I'm only going to do the first part tonight. But basically, the only idea that I have set in store is first, what this video is going to mainly be about, if we can, do the whole chapter, is going to be about symbolism, etymology, phonetics, and we're just going to be looking at the language. And then the second part is going to be going into more the mathematical side of it, because that's ultimately the dichotomy of gematria, is that it is this duality of words and letters and math and numbers. Okay, so the words and the letters have more to do with the right brain. It's more emotional. It's more, ethos, I guess, is the right word. I'm not entirely sure. It's been a while since I looked into that trinity of ethos, pathos, and logos. But and then the second aspect is we're going to be looking more at the left brain, sort of mathematical, logical side of it, like that, right? But obviously, there's logic in both. But that's basically the way that I'm going to do it. it's probably going to take me, maybe 2-hour videos just to really get to the bottom of everything that I want to talk about, just simply because, like I said, this singular chapter really hit me hard. It's the chapter in Mark where he talks about the parable of the sower, who goes out and sows seeds and this and that. And so that was the chapter that I decided to do this with. So yeah. Should we do a breath? Yeah, let's go ahead and do a breath, and then we'll go ahead and start. The prayer will be, let me see. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Bless this breath to heal my body, mind, soul, and spirit. Amen. Now begin by breathing in through your mouth, breathing out through your mouth, breathing in through your mouth, and breathing out through your mouth, breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your nose, breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your nose, breathing in through your mouth, breathing out through your mouth, in through your mouth, out through your mouth. Remember, deep, full breaths. Breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth, breathing in through your nose, and out through your nose, breathing in through your mouth, and out through your nose, in mouth, out mouth, in mouth. And drink a little bit of my Jagulan Rooibos tea. Give it a moment. Understanding the intention of why we are here and why I'm making this video and why you may be watching it. It's all about this. No more discussing things about me, unless of course it has to do with this. But talking primarily about this. Okay. So, Mark 4:1. And he began again to teach by the seaside, and there was gathered unto him a great multitude, so that he entered into a ship and sat in the sea, and the whole multitude was by the sea on the land. So, first off, there's a lot of astrology that is embedded and encoded through the language of the scripture, but I'm not very knowledgeable about that. If you want to understand more regarding that, go check out Marty Leeds' The Astrology of the Book of Mark. He really goes into depth about all the various different ways that now we're going to talk a little bit about it, but not much. But it helps us to understand, because ultimately the cycle of the sun through the year is ultimately about different parts of the process of energy fluctuation, and that energy fluctuation um, manifests itself in this, which the 12 uh, disciples, and sorry, that's a crude drawing of it, but you get the idea. The 12 disciples are the 12 Sephira, which actually goes back, is related to the word sapphire, which is really interesting. It probably has something to do with the blue stone, the lapis, But anyways, so that's what it has to do with, right? So, it's important to understand the astrological influences because it's such a big part. But we're not going to get into that. We're mainly going to be talking about the phonetics, the etymology, the symbolism, structure of the language itself, and to understand the metaphysical processes that it's ultimately trying to get you to understand, right? Because it's all about your experience. Okay, that's what it's all about. And liberating you from the bad and delivering you into the good. That's what all of this is about. So when they say that let me go over it again. And he began again to teach by the seaside, and there was gathered unto him a great multitude, so that he entered into a ship and sat in the sea, and the whole multitude was by the sea on the land. Now Jesus is in a ship in the water, right? So whenever you see the symbolism of the ship, right? Again, that goes back to Argo Navis and this and that, but like I said, I'm not going to get into the astrology. The ship represents the vessel, and the vessel, or the temple, not made with human hands in that sense, is your body, right? It's your consciousness housed in your body, right? So Jesus is in the ship, he's in the vessel, and that's floating upon the water, right? This goes back to the pineal gland, which is a little, pine cone shaped vessel floating around in a pool of water, which is what is generating your consciousness with light, okay? And the multitude is on the land, right? So the Gentiles, right, they're on the earth. They're earthly, right? They're still living in the materialistic, physical mindset, right? And Jesus is out floating on the water in a ship, okay? So whenever you see water symbolism at any point, it ultimately goes back to the waters above, which is talking about the heavenly canopy, right? It is the mem, as you know, the Hebrew letter, which means primordial waters of creation, right? It is the untapped, unmanifest potential state of God's creation. It's where God is ultimately, changing things from the unconscious into the conscious, right? Which is the light, right? So he's in the waters, right? He's in the heavenly realms above. And we, as human beings, are on the earth, right? The multitude is on the earth, and he's up in the waters. So he's in the heaven. So we get this reference to heaven and earth, right? And he began to teach by the seaside, right? By the seaside. You see the word by, right? B-E-Y. It's also pointing to the B-I, which is the duality, right? It's talking about, and the greatest duality, the original duality, is the heavens and earth. It goes back to Genesis 1, right? So I'm going to try and not be verbose here or repeat myself, but we're just going to try and move along so that we don't make the video too long. But yeah, so basically that's how it sets it up. Jesus is in heaven, right? He's in a vessel in the waters, right? And we're down here on the earth below, right? And we're learning from him. He began to teach. And going on to 4:2. And he taught them many things by parables, and said unto them in his doctrine, right? So taught, right? Taught phonetically goes back to T-A-U-T, which means to make something tightly bound or tightly connected, tightly tied down, right? Because ultimately what we want to do is tie ourselves to God, right? We want to reconnect to God and make that nice and taut, okay? Obviously, it has the original meaning of taught as well, as where's to learn. But it's also telling us about that, and we'll see whenever it comes back in. Religion comes from religare, which means to bind, right? To connect, to tie, to link and chain, right? To connect. Taut, right? T-A-U-T is also telling us about tau, right? Tau, which is a circle's circumference to the radius, right? So it's basically telling us about the perimeter being connected to the center, right? It's about being on the external and connecting back to the center, right? He's teaching them in parables, right? Oh yeah, and the T, tau, tau, and T. It's about the T goes back to the cross of matter, right? That's our body, right? The tree in that sense, right? That's what the T is, and so it's tau is talking about going from the external part of our body through the radius to the center. Okay. He taught them many things by parables. What is, parable is like a comparison, right? A metaphor, basically trying to teach us about one thing, but using another example to illustrate that idea for us, right? Parables is also telling us phonetically about a pair of bulls, right? And the bull is, and we know that this is the case through all the different encodings with, say, for instance, what is it? Luke 23:43, right? Verily I say unto thee, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. The paradise is going back to not only heaven, but it's also telling us about the two cubes of Kabbalah, right? The doubling of the cube, right? The tesseract of Revelation 21:16. But the bull is the torus, right? That's the toroidal field. It's one magnetic field, right? And there's a pair of them, right? So the sun has a magnetic field and the moon has a magnetic field. When you have a pair of bulls, right, it's talking about the reunification of them, because when two toroidal fields come together, they connect, they tie, they link together in that sense, right? And the stars themselves move in a parabolic arc, right? Yes, so it is about two toroidal fields coming together, right? Unifying, right? That's what the pair of bulls is, right? And so it's you can see it either as the sun and the moon ultimately being one. That's the alchemical marriage. You can see it as the sun connecting to you, right? That's another connection, right? That's the alchemical marriage between you and Christ, right? This goes back to the Sansum of the Maya, right? Where we are connected to the sun and the son is connected to the Father, as they say in John 14:6, or as he says in John 14:6. And ultimately, he taught them many things by parables and said unto them, un means one, and two is two, right? So unto, going from the one to the two by his doctrine, right? His doctrine. Remember, he is in a ship, okay? Docked on the land. And the doctrine is ultimately, doc also goes back to document, right? So it is the word, right? Of the trine, the Trinity. It's the power of three, because through the power of three, we consolidate all dualities back into unity. Okay, Trinity, tri-unity, right? Doctrine. So now the whole aspect of taught, right? And the parables coming together, and the doctrine, right? The land and the water, ultimately being one, heaven and earth, right? Suddenly that makes a lot more sense now, doesn't it? Absolutely. That's 4-2. 4-2, well, I'm not going to get into the math, but 4-2 goes back to the rainbow, which is another connection, right? Which goes back to God's promise, goes back to pi, right? It goes back to the rainbow bridge, which unites heaven and earth, right? So getting into 4-3 now. He says, hearken, behold, they went out a sower to sow. Hearken, behold, there went out a sower to sow. Okay, so hearken, this singular word tells us so much about what they're trying to get you to understand. Hearken. Hearken, right? the prefix har or hear, right, is telling you to listen, right? That's what the word hearken is telling you. Pay attention, right? I call unto you, right? Hear, ken. Okay, hear also goes back to your ear, and it also goes back to the heart, right? And it goes back to the earth, right? Because it is the earth plane that is in the center. And whenever you think of the whole aspect of the Trinity, it is the one in the center, which is the two that have come together, right? So it is the heart plane, right? Not so much the underworld or the overworld, but the earth plane in the center where we live. Hearken, kin, okay? Kin, its etymology means to know, okay? He's saying hearken, he's saying pay attention and know, okay? Now it makes a lot more sense why the word know starts with the letter K, right? Because it's telling us of the this power of the letter K, okay? Because in the runic alphabet, the letter K is Kenaz, right? Kenaz, but it's also known as Kin or Kan, right? Kin, the rune, its meaning, because every single one of the 24 runes of the Elder Futhark and the I think it's like the 16 of the newer Futhark. I'm not so familiar with that. But kin or Kenaz means need fire. Okay, it's talking about the fire in that which we need. Okay, specifically the fire and the hearth. Right, so hearth, the hearth. Again, going back to har, as in hear, and hearken, but it's also going back to the heart, the hearth. Right, which is the place in which it holds the fire. Right, so you go back to the firmament. Right, were it not for that sun, we would all be dead. Just like Christ. Were it not for Christ, we would all be dead. Because Christ is the sun, right? He gives us that need fire, right, in order to be alive. Ken also goes back to the Tzolkin, which, if you've heard me talk about the New Testament and the Tzolkin before, you'd realize that there are a lot of connections between the two. Most notably, that there are 260 chapters in the New Testament, and there are 260 kin on the Tzolkin. All right, Tzolkin, Tzol, soul. Some people pronounce it like that, Solkin. All right, soul, again going back to the sun. Kin, going back to the sun with the rune Kinaz. Right. Oh, by the way, Kinaz is also the rune of enlightenment, to learn, to know, as kin means, but it also means to cleanse, the baptism of fire which Jesus puts us through, so that way we can purify out all the bad within us, right? The need fire, right? Kin is also the name, is short for the Maya solar god known as Kinnick, right? And the Native Americans also had this medicinal herb mixture called Kinnick, right? I don't know much about it, but I just thought it was pretty interesting. But anyways, Kinnick Ahau, right, is the name for the sun in the Maya tradition, right? And each of the individual kin are also a unification of the lunar tones and the solar seals, right? So the oneness between the two, right? So all of that is embedded within the name Harkin, right? Fiery hearth, the need fire. Kinnikahau, the Maya solar god, right? Means to know, hear kin, right? Kin also means family, because through Christ, we are all family. We are all one, right? All of that is embedded within one singular word. So ultimately, what is Christ telling you? Listen to the Son, both the S-O-N of God and the sun, right? Because again, the kuksansum, right, that the Maya told us about was a thread that connected us to the sun, and which connected the sun to the center of all creation, which is where the Father is, or the Father, Mother, right? So, again, just as Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. You see what he's telling you? Hearken. Behold, a sower went forth to sow. Again, the sower is the person who goes and, casts the seeds into the ground, right? Sow, right, also is phonetically identical to the word sow, S-E-W, right? S-E-W means to, make cloth get, tied together in that sense, right? When you sow, you go back to Mark 2:21, he gives you the parable of no man seweth a new piece of cloth on an old garment. What is that talking about? Well, it's talking about the need fire, right? Sorry, I was hearing some strange noises. But the need fire, right? You cast away the old self to make way for the new, right? And so S-O-W and S-E-W, right? You see how what they're telling you here? Just like the new, right, has to happen right now in E-W and in O-W, right? So ultimately, right, we're getting into the parable of the sower, right? He's casting forth the seeds, right? So it also connects back to sow, right? People make this motion here, the sine wave, right? So, goes back to tying things together or connecting things through the string, right? 4:4, and it came to pass, as he sowed, some fell by the wayside, and the fowls of the air came and devoured it up. Okay, so, and it came to pass. Whenever you see the words came to pass or come to pass, what it's telling you about is the heavenly circle again, right? The turning of the heavens, right? The way the stars all move in this parabolic arc circularly around our heads, right? It's talking about the progression of time, right? And as he sowed, right? Sowed, again, phonetically, this goes back to the fourth step of the pardes, right? The pardes is the Hebrew tradition of exegesis, basically biblical analysis, where the sod refers to the mystical teachings that are embedded into the words of the doctrine, right? So again, and as he sowed, you see? And it came to pass. So yeah, come pass. Come pass goes back to the circle, which is of the heavenly realm. You'll notice in the Freemasonic square and compass, the compass points upwards because the circle is heaven and the square is the earth below. And it came to pass, right? It's a turning and revolving of the temporal progression and change, right, of life. Just as the sun traverses through the waters above, and that's what gives us our sea suns. Sea sun. It's the sea of the sun. Jesus walking on the water. Okay? So, and as he sowed, some fell by the wayside. All right? Some fell by the wayside. The wayside is, so the way of Christ is in the center. Right? It's in the center of you. It's in the center of time, which is now. Right? He is in the center because he is the duality of the Father and the Holy Ghost, the Father and the Mother, come into one. He is the child, the byproduct of the two coming together. Right? Some fell by the wayside, so they fell on the side of the way, not in the way, but on the side. So what this is telling us is about the auxiliary area outside the center, right? It goes back to the past and the future, right? The external aspect, right? And the fowls of the air came and devoured it up. Anytime you see bird symbolism, it's talking about spirits, okay? Spirits. Um, if I'm not mistaken, was it? No, sorry. Birds or fish symbolism, because just as the birds fly around in the sky, the air, the fish swim around in the sea, right? And you'll notice back in Genesis, the birds and the fish are created together. And then later on are the red blood, like, the beasts of the earth, right? But the fish and the birds are created together because they're parallels to each other of spirits, right? The fowls of the air came and devoured them up. In other words, certain spirits came and devoured those seeds, right? Yeah, through Genesis 1:20 and 1:22, he creates birds and fish together, right? Getting into Mark 4:5 now. And some fell on stony ground, where it had not much earth, and immediately it sprang up, because it had no depth of earth. Okay, the stony ground represents the rigidity, right? The seeds can't get in, right? Because you've hardened your heart in that sense, right? You've turned to stone, right? The seeds can't get into the more softer, supple parts of your earth, which is your body, right? It had no way to enter in, right? Just as how the scribes and the Pharisees neither go in or suffer others to go in, right? And the seeds immediately sprang up, right? The seed is the essence of life, right? It's the essence of life energy. The life sprang up out of the seed. It dried up. The life that was once in the seed evaporated in the heat of the sun, right? They had no depth of earth, in other words, right? The seed couldn't take root, right? Because they had no depth within their vessel in that sense. They're very shallow, right? The seeds couldn't get through. It's like the rigidity of the ego in that sense, right? They don't enter into the center, all right? And when you see the letter C, it's going back to the heavenly circle. The circle, the compass, right? It's shaped just like the circle, right? When you take a compass and you turn it, you're making a C. So when you see the letter C, which is the third letter, right? Enter, right, means to go within. And center means to go within into that heavenly realm, right? The center of you, in that sense. Up here and in here, right? Because it had no depth of earth. 4:6. But when the sun was up, it was scorched. And because it had no root, it withered away. In other words, which, I'm not going to wait until a particular verse comes up, but just as Jesus says in Mark 4:14, the sower soweth the word. So all of this that he's talking about parabolically is talking about not sowing seeds, right? This is a story that Jesus has made up to convey a greater truth, okay? Keep that in mind. It's about teaching, right? When somebody comes along and teaches you the doctrine, when they teach you the word, whenever they take the time to explain that to you, that's ultimately what the sower is, right? Somebody who is planting those thoughts, those seeds into your head, right? And if you're rigid and you got a stony ground and it can't get into the depth of here, it's not going to take root and therefore grow up into something beautiful, right? And immediately when the sun was up, right, it was scorched. So when the sun was up, when the arrival of Christ shows up, right, it withered away, right? In other words, seeds that are firmly planted into the ground and nice and moist and supple, when the sun arrives, they grow. But when it lands on stony ground, then they just dry up, right? So it's about, in other words, when somebody takes the time to teach you the word, if you let it in and to take root and you actually consider it and you start to let it grow, when the sun arrives, it grows even more. But if, it just lands on stony ground and you won't let it in, you're being rigid like a rock, right? Rigid like a stone, and not a lively stone, mind you, right? A dead stone, right? Then it just dries up when the sun comes, right? It was scorched, right? It was scorched. And scorch comes from the Old Norse skorpna, right? Skorpna, which is both related to the word score, which means 20, right? And also means a mark, a line that you draw, right? And the score goes back to Scorpio, right? Scorpio, right? And if you think about the Scorpio, right? It's talking about score, which is a line, or 20, right? Pi, right? Which is the circle and with the diameter. Scorpio, right? And this gets back into astrological stuff and all of that, but I'm not going to get into that. But anyways, it goes back to the Old Norse Skorpna, which is connected to Scorpio, right? Which is the Johns, right? So you have St. John the Baptist, St. John Zebedee, and St. John the Divine. All three of those are paralleling each other. They are ultimately the same archetype, which is not only the scorpion, but it's also the eagle, right? The phoenix. Because ultimately all of this is about rebirth, right? Letting the wisdom in, casting away the old. No man seweth a new piece of cloth on an old garment, letting go of the old and making way for the new, right now, right? It's talking about the phoenix rebirth, right? It's talking about the old bird, the old spirit in that sense, dying into the ash. And I'm not going to get into ash symbolism, but it's actually really fascinating with the ash tree and Yggdrasil of the Norse mythology. But and then letting that fiery bird rise anew. And that goes back to Cygnus, near the pole star, right, which is in the garden, the flaming sword, which is also the burning tree. We're not going to get into that. Again, Skorpna is related to score, which means 20, right? Again, it's talking about our fingers and toes, right? Because ultimately, the word of God is the light, and the light is coming off that circumference of that sun, right? In little seeds, right? And it's entering in through us, our circumference of our magnetic field, and the perimeter of that is our fingers and toes. You want that diameter to strike and mark through that circumference and get inside you. Again, going back to the beginning when it was encoding Tau. You want that word to get in. You want it to break through that perimeter. Because again, the stone goes back to our energy field, the ashlar stone of the Masonic tradition, right? When it's a dead stone, it can't get in. And it gets scorched, which goes back to Skorpna. And go back to the score and Scorpio, right? It getting inside you, right? But it's burned away, right? Because whatever you have within you needs to get cleansed, right? In other words, you need to be reborn so that way you have new flesh where the seed can get in, right? You need a new sense of self, because if your regular sense of self is rigid and egoic, you're not going to let the seed get in, right? But when the sun was up, right? The arrival of the sun, which is the beginning of spring, symbolically on the whole year. It's also the morning time, Aries. When the sun arrives, right? it was scorched. And because it had no root, it withered away, right? It had no root. Again, this goes back to the red chakra, right? Which is related to the external part of your field, okay? All of this is interconnected, right? And this is 4-6. The root chakra also deals with the the individual body, right? 4-6. 46 is the number of chromosomes in each gender. So 4-6 or 46 is a reference to the genders, which is what the root chakra is telling us. That's a main aspect about the root chakra, right? Getting into 4-7 now. 4-7. And some fell among thorns, and thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no fruit. Okay. And some fell among thorns, right? When you see the word some, it's telling you about multiplicity and unity, and ultimately the unity of unity and multiplicity, right? Some is talking about individual parts, just a few pieces of the whole, right? Not the whole, but it's talking about a few pieces. But some, S-U-M, this is a phonetic connection, some means the totality, right? Because ultimately we're all individual human beings walking around, right? We look different, we get into arguments, we hate each other, we kill each other because my God's better than your God or whatever, you know what I mean? We're some different people, right? It's just some of us, right? Just a few, right? Not all of it. But some is talking about the whole of us, all of us, right? Just like how the word whole tells us about that. W-H-O-L-E means the whole thing, the totality. But a whole means nothingness, right? Because the nothingness is the all, and the all is in the nothingness. And the sum is in the sum, and the sum is in the sum. In other words, they're within one piece, one singular water droplet contains the essence that is the ocean, right? The drop in the ocean and the ocean in the drop. There's the great light, which is God himself, right? God Almighty, right? But yet we're little individual pieces of that, right? So we're like little godlings walking around. We have the essence of God within us, right? We're made up of God stuff, right? That's what we're made out of, right? So we're little tiny lights, right? Which is ultimately all one big light. See what I'm saying? That's what the seeds are. You have the tree, and then you have the seed, right? The whole symbolism of the seed inside the tree and the seed, etc. It goes back to this same thing. Fractals, right? You ever seen those little Russian dolls where it's like a big doll and then inside that is a smaller doll and then inside that, right? Levels, right? It all looks so different, but it's ultimately one thing. Just like the rainbow, right? Different colors ultimately come from one thing, right? Some fell by the, Some fell among thorns, right? So when you see the word some, it's not only talking about the individual pieces, but it's talking about the whole thing, okay? So just keep that in mind, right? Some fell among thorns, right? Fell also goes back to descend into, right? To descend, right? Just like the evening star. It's talking about the light coming down and manifesting into the earth below, right? But fell also means like corrupted, right? Because again, down here, can things become dualistic and corrupted, right? Or opposite of of God, right? Or seemingly, right? Fell, right? Some fell among thorns. Now, thorns, again, this goes back to another rune, Thursaz. Thursaz, Thursaz is the rune which means giants, if I'm not mistaken, but it also means thorn, right? Is the thorn rune, right? It means resistance, conflict, right? And that makes a lot of sense considering the Book of Enoch, but we're not going to get into that. With the whole giants and men and all that, right? yeah, the Thursaz rune, which means thorn, means resistance and conflict. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong about this, but it's like whenever thorns are a symbol of nature becoming corrupted in that sense, right? It's like the rose. It's beautiful, but it also will hurt you, right? And the rose is a huge symbol of both Christ and Venus, which goes back to Mary Magdalene, right? The great feminine and the great masculine. That's what the rose, and that's going to come back up at later on. But that ultimately, what the thorns is telling us is talking about resistance, conflict, opposition, challenge, right? Some fell among thorns and choked it, and it yielded no fruit, right? Going into 4:8, and other fell on good ground, and did yield fruit, that sprang up and increased, and brought forth some 30, and some 60, and some 100. The whole 30, 60, and 100 thing is purely like mathematical, which ultimately 30, 60, and 100 add up to 190. And within the within the number 190, or 19, because 190 is 19 triangulated, which is really interesting because when you apply the rule of, I guess, magnitude in that sense, 190, 1900, 19,000, 19, 1.9, 0.19, they're all ultimately carrying the same archetypal pattern. It's just the magnitude, that it's based on is different, but it's ultimately the same root number. Within 19 is embedded the 360 degrees of the circle and the square. I'm not going to get into that, but again, the beginning of it was telling us about tau. It's been telling us about pi. It's talking about the seeds getting into us, right? Passing through our circumference, right? But yeah, again, the rule of Kalel, 1 to 20, right? Going back to the Scorpna, right? Is the same as 0 to 19, right? Not introducing, but bringing up the rule of Kalel, right? I'm not going to go into every detail about it. We'll probably go into it with the mathematical side later on, but anyways, so yeah, the 30, 60, 100, that's really highly intelligent, super logical mathematical stuff that gets into like all of this. So we'll get into that later though. And some fell on good ground, right? It's flexible, it's young soil, it's supple, it's got nutrients, right? It's got the minerals, right? It is open-minded, it's childlike, it's young, it's youthful, it's full of life, right? That's what the good ground is. Because again, the seed is the word, right? And the good ground is where the word can get in and take root, right? Where you actually hear a sower, right? The sower, Christ, and his word, and it gets inside you and takes root and begins to grow, and your garden becomes full of life, right? As opposed to barren, desolate wasteland, going back to the abomination of desolation, right? The abomination of the desolation, you could think of like, what is it? Mordor, right? Where it's all like stony ground, right? It's just ash and plumes of sulfur and volcano and like blackened skies. It's like, you don't want to be like that, okay? You want to be like the good ground, right? Which is the nice, beautiful garden, right? Midgard, right? That's the center realm, the middle garden, right? Which is the area around Polaris, right? Because you have Adam and Eve and the serpent that goes up to the tree and everything like that, and the flaming sword of sickness, etc., etc., etc. You want the good ground. In other words, like Jesus says, unless ye become as one of these little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven, right? So in other words, don't be rigid. Don't be stubborn. Don't be close-minded to the word and the truth, because that's what you want. You want the good word, the good book to get in here and take root and grow so that it yields fruit, which contains the new seeds. All right. Like begets like, but we'll get into that later on. Yield, right? Yield is a very interesting thing because it means produce, right? To produce, right? To, uh, again, going back to production of plants and vegetables and fruits and all that, right? But it also means to give way, to allow, right? Yield means when you yield to someone, you're giving way to them, you're allowing them, right? To do something or whatever, or whenever you yield to the truth, you're letting it take root inside you. So yield is a very interesting word as well. Fruit, again, it means the reward, right? Whenever you receive the seeds, they grow up and they produce fruit, and then you have the new seed, right? That's the revelation, because whenever you learn a specific thing, right, and you let it take root and you study it and you mull over it and let it grow, right, and it gets into this, right, and should sleep and rise night and day, and the earth brings fruit of herself, you knoweth not how, etc. Then that produces fruit, which will give you the next seed of truth. And you take that seed and you plant it, and then that continues the process. That's the revelatory experience of theophanies. And what is it? I can't remember the word, but it basically means divine revelation from God, right? Learning from God, right? But fruit also is the name of each one of these in Kabbalah, the Sephirah. It's the fruit on the tree. Hence why when Adam and Eve took two fruit off the tree and they corrupted the tree, then it became this thing, right? And then what is it in, I think it's in either James or 1 Thessalonians, it says, put on the helmet of salvation and the breastplate of righteousness, which are these two that we're missing. And then it just tells you to put those two on and those two only, and then after that, it only ever brings up the sword of the Spirit. So, and that's the one between them. Think about that. And in a sense, it's like telling you, feast upon the fruit of this Sephirah, right? Sephirah goes back to sapphire, and the most common is blue, and that's the blue chakra, right? The blue Sephirah. Feast upon the sword of the Spirit, right? Have that sword coming out of your mouth in that sense, because this is the mouth chakra, right? And then it will produce these two. It'll allow it to produce these two fruits that we're missing, right? Is a whole thing going into Kabbalah, but we're going to get into more Kabbalah later on. How long has it been? Oh, goodness, it's already been 50 minutes. I really wish that I could sum up, but I just have so much to say, and there are 41 verses, so we're going to, go over a lot, but again, I'm not going to pressure myself, and we're trying to look at each individual piece of this and just make however many parts of this video that we need to. Sprang up, right? What does it say? And other fell on good ground and did yield fruit that sprang up and increased, right? Sprang up. Again, this is another reference to springtime when the sun makes that rise, that ascent, right? It's the return of the light. When springtime comes, it's the daytime. The sun is returned. Praise of the sun, right? And it's talking about the tree growing up, right? And reaching up to the sky. You see? Again, the fruit or the tree, the seed, the mustard seed, which grow into a great tree, we have the tree of life. Okay? When we talk about the coming of Christ or the arrival of Christ, it's talking about this portion of the upswing or of the cycle. So again, the zodiac, right, talks about the whole part of the year. Sorry, I know this is a crude drawing, but this is the sine wave. The first half of the year, spring and summer, this is the bicycle, okay? This is the 2 cycle, right? Which is, encoded within the traditional playing cards, and that's why they're called bicycle cards, right? It's talking about the bicycle. You have the cycle of life. This is the tree of life, and then the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? It's the duality part. This is when winter comes. So when we talk about the dark night of the soul, catabasis, that's this portion of the year. It's also nighttime and microcosmically, right? Because again, the cycle of the day, the cycle of the year, the cycle of your life, and the great cycle are all paralleling each other, right? So when we talk about spring up, the arising, right? The ram, Aries, right? When we talk about the arrival of the lamb, the ram, right? It's talking about this portion, right? When everything's good. Jesus Christ technically never goes away because he's one with Luna, which is this half, but he seemingly disappears because he's going into the underworld to fight the devil, right? That's the sun parabolically moving away to cover the other portion of the yin-yang of the flat earth, right? Oh my goodness gracious, that yin-yang sucks. But you get the idea, right? Again, all of this language is telling us about this. Jesus Christ never goes away, but sometimes things are good and sometimes things are bad. That's what they're telling us about. Even down here, when we're going through our own dark night of the soul, Christ is not gone, right? It's just this is the period of time when we're baptized by the water, the ice, the cold part, right? So that way when the sun returns, we venerate him. We have respect and reverence towards him. But anyways, that's when you see the words spring up like that, that's what they're telling you about. When they say the arrival or the coming of Christ, that's what they're talking about. Again, our arrival, right? And I know what you may be thinking, like, with the word rival, right? But the prefix "r", right? What is it? The rival, by the way, rival, you go back archaically, rival doesn't necessarily mean enemy, okay? Rival just means someone who challenges you, okay? It's actually good to have rivals in your life. You know, I remember growing up playing Pokemon, you know, and it's like, you'd had a rival, but you were ultimately friends. You see this a lot in Japanese animation where somebody starts off as someone who the main character dislikes and they argue with them, but ultimately they become friends, like Vegeta and Goku in Dragon Ball Z, right? But anyways, a rival is not necessarily the same as an enemy or a foe. Just remember that, right? So our rival, right, is Christ challenging us, right? Because sometimes hearing the truth is not what our egos want to hear. So that's why so many people, you know, look at Christ as an enemy, because he's telling them the truth that they need. But R, the prefix ARR, goes back to the arising of Aries, right? The coming of Christ, right? The R, because again, the letter R is the 18th letter, and that's telling us about these semicircles. And these are 180 degrees, right? And I, again, goes back to the great self, which the great self is Christ himself. And Val, right, is related to honor. It's related to energy, etc. So arrival, right? Arrival, right? All of those, the ARR, the I, and the VAL in that word are all telling you about this right here. But anyway, I didn't mean to go into that because I hadn't previously. But again, you know, these things come along when you're doing it off the top of your dome. Wow. Sorry, I had a revelation just there, but it's still not crystallized yet. We're going to get into it later on. And like however many weeks and months it takes for me to get more knowledge about it. Getting into 4:9 now. 4:9. It says, and he said, so 4:8 says, another fell on good ground and did yield fruit that sprang up and increased. Again, the crease, right, is that inner part, right? It's the inside. Increase. You go into the crease, right? Which is going into the center, right? And increased and brought forth, right? Brought forth. Again, 4 goes back to It goes back to the cross, goes back to the square, brought forth, right? Again, the unity of heaven and earth, but in our experience in the earthly realm, the four, right? Brought forth some 30 and some 60 and some 100. 4:9. And he said, again, hang on. This is just like a little interesting tidbit, but Saeed in Arabic, which is spelled the same as said, right? Saeed means, it's Arabic for blessing, joy, and happiness, by the way. So, anyways. And he said unto them, again, we get this reference to unto, which means one, two, right? So, going back to heaven, earth, all the dualities, right? He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. And he said unto them, again, T represents the cross, the tree, right? It represents our bodies, right? The T, right? Him, just like in Bethlehem, right? Hem is talking about the stitching, going back to sewing and all of that. It's talking about the hem, right? Which is the outermost part of our extremities, right? Our fingers and our toes. Them, just in the word them, it's telling us so much, right? This goes back to Selah and the solar seals and all kinds of stuff. It's really interesting, but we're not going to break that down. But the hymn is talking about the external part of the tree, the cross. You got the cross, the tree, and then the hymn, which is the sealing off, right? He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Again, let him hear. When you see the word let, right? Again, it's talking about the spark of light, right? Let there be light, because the light, the fire gets lit, right? Again, L-E-T. I'm not going to go into all of that, but yeah, it's the spark of light, right? Of the spark of life, right? He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Let that spark, basically ignite within you, right? If you have the ears, which is, again, the word ear, hear, hearth, heart, earth, they're all talking about the inside right here. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. It's talking about the spark of that light coming alive within your heart. All right? Which is the dielectric center, right? And that's where the light is born, from that center. 4:10. And when he was alone, the mathematics of this verse are pretty brilliant. I'm not going to take the time to go into it, but I just remembered that. And when he was alone, they that were about him with the 12 asked of him the parable, right? Again, when you see the word alone, it's telling you all one. Alone, all one. Because again, the parts are in the whole, or the totality, and the totality are in each individual parts. Within each individual, seemingly distinct, different human being is the light of Christ. Therefore, all of them are your kin, right? And when he was alone with the 12, And when he was alone, they that were about him with the 12 asked of him the parable. Again, the 12 are not only the sephira, the fruit of the Kabbalah tree, but it's also of the zodiac. Because these are the 12 auxiliary parts, the 12 moons, 12 signs, all centered around that 13th here in the center, right? The seemingly invisible, you can't see it because the dielectric center is always invisible, As far as I'm aware, we haven't figured out a type of technology that allows us to see the dielectric, but when you understand pataphysics, in the center of metaphysics, you understand that is the most substantiated. It's the source of all creation, right? Christ, he's the 13th, he's the Son, the 7 amidst the 13. He's in the center, like the Last Supper, right? He is the sun moving throughout the 12 portions of the year. Right, hang on. Let me go ahead and fix this real quick. And when he was alone with the 12, they asked of him the parable. There we go. That's a lot better. In this singular shape is explained so much. We'll just do it like this for now. But imagine these are 12 distinct parts, right? Again, the sun is communicating the word to all the 12. And ultimately, they're all one, right? Peter is his head, right? The other disciples, there's various different things to connect it to it. But again, it's all, sowed, right? It's all the anagogic, and I'm not going to take the time to go into it. But when they say the 12, they're not only talking about the zodiac signs, but they're talking about the 12 sephira as well, right? They asked of him the parable. 4:11, and he said unto them, unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God, but unto them that are without, all these things are done in parables, right? So again, oh yeah, this is another suffix that contains a lot, just like the suffix ken. Ven is also very important. So unto you, again, 1, 2, comes from the 1 to the 2, which is your duality, right? Unto you, it's sending it to your ego, right? For, your individual self. It is given to understand the mystery of the kingdom of God, right? Given. So the G, anytime you see the G, it's talking about that seed, right? It's talking about an individual unit of electricity, right? It's like the energy of Christ. When you see that G, right? The I is the universal self, right? And then means to come, right? Etymologically, it means to come. This goes back to the compass, remember? Then also means to seek and desire, to love and win. When you see W and V, they're often interchangeable with each other. So win and then, right? This is why the beginning of the name Venus has Ven, right? Just like the word heaven, right? And again, Ven means to come. That goes back to the compass. That's the heavenly, right? The heaven, right? Right? It means ultimately love, right? It means to that desire, right? Within us, to reconnect with God, right? And then, with Venus is talking about the morning and the evening star, right? To return up to the heavenly realms as the morning star, and to fall down from the heavens down to the earth as the evening star. Even, right? Even, right? It's that duality, right, of the two, right? But anyways, given, just within that singular word, right? It ultimately is telling us that to understand the truth of God is a desire that we all have to reach up to that heaven, right? Then us, right? It's the desire within us, Venus, right? But anyways, it's the heaven of us, right? Then also means worthy of honor. It is given unto you to understand. Wait, did I say? It is given unto you. It is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God. Right? The mystery. Mist goes back to water vapor in the air. Right? So again, it's another reference to the heavenly realm, which is the untapped, unmanifest potential of the waters of Mem. Right? And as you birth the light within that, right, then it's no longer a mystery, right? Now that there's a light in it, now you understand. But until it becomes, or until the light is birthed in it, it's a mist. It's the waters above, which is also atmosphere, which is air. So when you see this word mystery, it's talking about this dualistic idea of water and air, right? So the heavenly field of potential in which is stirred. The sky spins around, right? It's the compass, right? Came to pass. Time moves on, right? The wheel in the sky. Mr. It stirs, right? This goes back to the what is it? The cauldron, as that one time that I was talking about that. Yeah, and then why, right? Mystery. So you have the mist, right? That water's above, stirring around, time moving on, right? Because things that were once a mystery, as time moves on, and we apply effort and, then, right, going back to seek and desire, right? Then, the mist stirs around, and then we have the letter Y, mystery, right? The letter Y, going back to the Greek alphabet, is what is it? I can't remember if upsilon is the actual letter Y, but the way it's shaped is exactly like our letter Y, right? And what upsilon is ultimately telling us about is because there's like metaphorical symbolism around each of the letters, right? Upsilon is telling us of the movement upwards, and you see the Y comes up and branches out like this. One road leads to destruction and death, and the other road leads to ever higher enlightenment, right? Seeking the mysteries, which then are no longer mysteries, but we shed light on them and we continue the process, right? What is all of this about? Solving mysteries and continuing to put the puzzle together. That's what this is one big puzzle. Well, that's the process of the sowing of the seeds, right? You sow the seeds, they take root, they grow up, then you get the fruit, then you take the new seed and continue the process. Vin means to desire, to seek, right? Love and beauty, honor. Heaven, mist, the waters above, and the air, right? Stirring around, mystery. And then you get that, the why, right? Why? Just breaking down an individual word. I ended up doing a video about the word mystery and how when it shows up in the New Testament, so that's why I went on that a little bit. But anyways, the kingdom, right? The kingdom. Again, the word king is telling us kin, which goes back to the sun, and then the G, right? Which is an individual unit of the light, right? The king, right? And ultimately the G is telling us about light in general. So king is telling us about the sun, right? And dome, again, dome is talking about the firmament. It's the king in the dome, the kingdom, right? So when you think of the kingdom, it's talking about the castle with the king inside of it, right? The dome is just the castle itself, okay? Just the firmament alone. But when you have the kingdom, so ultimately, what is a kingdom? A kingdom is a castle and the king, not just the dome itself. You understand what I'm saying? But most of the time when people think of a kingdom, they think of just the castle and the realm itself without the king in it. But without the king in it, you wouldn't have a kingdom. You would just have a dome, right? The domain, the domicile, the dome, right? The firmament, which is ultimately parallel. God made it parallel the icy crystalline firmament with the top of your skull, right? You go into Capernaum and Golgotha and all of that, which the way that they number the sequences of verses in this is telling us about this exact process of going up the 32 vertebrae and reaching the 33rd step, which is the kingdom, right? It's the high room, right? The high ram, right? Aries, right? Go back to Masonic lore, and it talks about Hiram Abif, right? It's talking about the high room, the uppermost rooms at feasts, this and that, right? Uh, which, you don't want to be like the scribes and the Pharisees, but that's what the upper room is telling us. It's talking about the realm of heaven, right? Again, upsilon, right? Right? That's what the kingdom is telling us about, right? But those who are without, right? Without has two meanings. It means to lack, right? But it also means to be outside, right? So again, when you're talking about those who went out, like as Paul in Hebrews or something, those who went out from us, they went to the outer portion, right? They left the center, which is where God's domain is, right? That's where his, the center of his kingdom. That's where you want to go. You want to go to the center where the Sabbath is, right? The resting place of God. You don't want to get pushed out, or you don't want to leave willingly. You know what I'm saying? You want to keep getting back to that center, right? Those who are without, because if you're without also means, you say within and without. It means outside, right? So when you say you're without the house, it means you're outside the house, right? But it also means to be lacking, right? You don't have. One second. You know what I mean? These things, they italicize the word these. But unto them that are without, all these things are done in parables, right? So when they say that all these things are done in parables, it means parabolic, right? In other words, they understand the parabolic metaphor, but they don't understand the ultimate truth of what that parable is pointing to, right? Those who are outside of the connection with God, right? Well, they're always connected to God, but you know what I mean. Like those who are not actively seeking a connection with God, right? They're lacking in that sense. They just think of them as stories. They're just parables. It's just parabolic metaphors, right? They're not understanding the greater truth contained within them. Because if they did, then they would understand how connected it is to their own experience and their own life and their own self, right? In other words, it always remains a secret. They just remain outside of it. They don't understand it. Hence, all these things are done in parables, right? Not only does it remain parabolic, right, but all it does is just affect their field, right? It's not affecting their consciousness, again, because the parable goes back to the magnetic field, etc. All it's doing is just affecting their field. The word of God affects all of our lives. It's not affecting their spirit. It's not affecting them consciously because they're not letting that seed within, right, to grow in the kingdom, etc. But it's still affecting them. All these things are done in parables. See what they're saying? That the word of God to those who are without just is parabolic, it's just metaphorical, but it's still affecting their parable, right? Their parables. I didn't have anything wrote down for these next three, but they're pretty straightforward, and we might actually stop here just because I've been going on for about an hour and 20 minutes. Again, like I said, I'm not rushing to finish the whole chapter, etc. Because again, like I said, I had a lot of material. Been really busy. Like I work. I was off today, so that's how I was basically able to make this video. But I work for the next X amount of days. I don't want to say, but I work for quite a bit, And then the next day that I'm off, I'm going to be going and hanging out with some friends. So, or my brothers, sorry, kind of blanked on my mind. But basically, my next off day, I don't know if I'm going to be able to have the time to, make the next part. Like, I really do want to finish this, but I don't want my videos to be really, really long. You know what I mean? But we'll finish it with these last three, right? or we'll finish with 12, 13, and 14. But it says, that seeing they may see, and not perceive, and hearing they may hear, and not understand, lest at any time they should be converted, and their sins should be forgiven them. In other words, it's like they see, right? This is 4:12. It's like they're looking, right? But they're not seeing things as they really are, right? Because what is faith? It's evidence of things not seen. That's part of it, right? It's the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, right? You're not gonna truly be able to understand the mechanics and the functioning of light, and understand the mechanics of the heavenly bodies moving around in the sky and be like, oh yeah, I understand that just from looking at it. You'd have to look at it for a very long time, or at least do your research and your studying, right? The mystical mechanisms and functionality of God's system, right, and the way he coordinates everything are not as easy to see as, say, if you're looking at a tree. It's like they see the tree, but they don't understand it, right? They don't understand how the tree is so meaningful to us, right? They may see the sun, but they may not understand the purpose and the power and the beauty and the love which comes from the light, right? That seeing they may see and not perceive, right? Again, because per means like individual things, right? And sieve is related to sieve, which means to filter. They're not filtering the truth, right? It's just passing through them. Goes in one ear and then out the other, And hearing they may hear and not understand, right? And, at 4:15, it starts to break down, the individual examples that are given in the parable of, the stony ground, the whatchamacallit, falling among thorns, etc., and the birds coming by and devouring them up. But yeah, let me see real quick. 4:30, and there, lest at any time they should be converted, and their sins should be forgiven them. Right? Because again, understanding this process is understanding how we, as a soul in the body, can understand the process of the soul, and therefore to understand what's bad and what's good. And that's what all this is about. This is what all these metaphysics and the symbolism and the mathematics and all of it, the wisdom, what it's all about is understanding the process as to how we can improve the state of the light within. You can either let thorns grow up around and choke it, cover it in darkness. You can do that. Remember Upsilon, the two paths, right? Or you can actually understand the process to go through that fiery baptism and cleanse yourself and let that light be reborn within you. Phoenix, right? The ash tree, right? The sewing the new piece of cloth on the old garment, all that symbolism. It's about understanding what is wrong and what is right, right? And well, I'm not going to get into a lot of these things, but anyways, 4:13, and then we'll read 4:13 and 4:14. It says, 4:13 says, and he said unto them, know ye not this parable? How then will ye understand how then will ye know all parables? 4:13, and he said unto them, know ye not this parable? And how then will ye know all parables? 4:14, the sower soweth the word. There are ultimately 41 verses in this chapter, by the way, and I'm going to stop at 4:14, which is, the you flip it around, right? The 4 and the 1. But, again, you add up 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and it adds up to 10, and the 10 is the 1, right? This is the detractors. It's all collapsing back into the 1. It's the cross all centered around that 1. And he said unto them, Know ye not this parable? Then how will ye know all parables? He's telling you something super important here. The sower soweth the word. Right? He's telling you the key to understanding all parables. He's giving you the key to understand all symbolism. Every piece of wisdom. He's giving you the key. This is the key. And the key is you. You are the key. The key is in here. You are the lock and you are the key. Right? Jesus is the key and the lock. We want to unlock Christ. We want to figure him out. We want to open him up and understand the truth that is in him. The light. He is the lock. But he's also the key. He is the key to our lock. Right? And he is the lock to our key. Right? In other words, he is the key to our lock, because when the light of Christ comes into us, right, into our heart, and unlocks that lock, then we're unlocked. We're no longer bound by death or suffering and stuff like that, because we understand the nature of the light and how to tend to it as a garden, right? Because he's telling you, this is the key. You are the key. The key is within you. It's the light within you. And that light is who you truly are. It is the light of your consciousness. It is the light of your soul. And the light that is within thee is the light that is within all. But what the light perceives within you is unique, just as unique as your hair, your skin tone, your color of your eyes, or your opinions or memories. It's all unique. But the light is the same. It's just in some, it's choked in thorns and darkness. And in others, it's shining brightly. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. The light that is in Christ is the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. Even science backs this up. When we talk about the actual activity of consciousness, it is little electrical currents inside your brain. That's what's making you alive. That's what you are. Your opinions and your ego and your memories and all of that, that's just the structure of the neural pathways in the brain that gets lost in who it thinks it is. But the actual thing that's making you alive is the only thing that disappears when the body dies. As soon as you die, that electricity turns off, goes away, breaks down, and it's gone. The neural pathways that light traveled through, that labyrinth that thought it was you, this name, this word, right? For instance, my name is Matthew, but I am not the name Matthew. It's just a word that was given to me. I am not my hopes and dreams. Those are projections, ideas. I am not my past. Those are memories. What are we? Who are you, as the caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland says. But you get the idea. right? And it's been an hour and a half. We've covered 14 of the 41 verses. 4:14. Again, the sower soweth the word. Again, that's the key, and that key is the light within, right? And this is embedded within our hands and feet. Again, because of all the other things that go back to the perimeter, the circle, right? The sealing off, that is you, right? The Bethlehem, right? The house of God, the temple of God, not made with human hands, right? That's you, the temple, right? This is 4:14. Well, you have 14 finger bones here, 14 finger bones here, 14 toe bones on your left foot, 14 toe bones on your right foot. That's 56. 4:14. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the cross. Sower soweth the word. And that word, we must allow in the word of Christ, the word of pure light, Christ himself. We must let this word take root inside us. Let it grow, because then it will nourish the tree. It will help to produce the fruit of the Sephirah, right? And we can restore these two that were taken from us or caused to decay within us. We could put these back on and restore the tree, because the sin of one person, or I guess two people, the sin of two people was what corrupted the tree. And the redemption of one man, Christ, restored the tree. But that's all that I'll say right now. Let the word of Christ take root. Take back your happiness. Take back your life. Take back your redemption. Right? Make the right choice. Go into the narrow way. Follow Christ. Because by doing so, you are connecting back to the source of all life and light. That's the only way to get where you really want to go. Okay, you don't want to go the other way, I promise you. Because that's the broad gate that leadeth to destruction. Many there be which go in thereat. You don't want to go that way. But anyways, there's so much more that I want to talk about. But like I said, I don't want the video to be too long. But yeah, there's so much more that I want to say. Like, we still have to finish the rest of the verses. I got so much written down here. It's gonna be great. But yeah, just again, we got to finish the rest of the verses etymologically, phonetically, symbolism, things like that. The metaphysical process of which they're talking about. This chapter is not over, but he just gave you the main primary key. The sower soweth the word. Know ye not this parable? Then how will ye know all parables? This is a miracle. This is a good thing, because by understanding this, we can understand all things. Think about that. Okay? The seed is not a seed. It's a story that Christ made up to get you to understand the word, the word, the word. I say it 3 times to give it emphasis, but we're going to go for now. We will see ourselves later. Y'all good people, Y'all have a nice one. Much love. Kisses, or as they say, ta-ta for now. Ladies and gents, ladies and germs, or whatever.